Well, good morning. I'm Reverend Bonnie, the community spiritual leader here at the center, in case you didn't know that. And we're kicking off a new month of February, and I wanted to show you something. This is my working volume of the Science of Mind text. And in here, I have all kinds of pages that are covered with the yellow highlighter and underlined. Does anybody have a book like this? Lots of underlines and highlightings. That's the way I process. And one of the things that I have highlighted in here says, know without a shadow of a doubt that as a result of your treatment, some action takes place in infinite mind. If you have a vague, subtle, unconscious fear, be quiet and ask yourself, who am I? What am I? Who is speaking? What is my life? In this manner, think right back to principle until your thought becomes perfectly clear again. And I'm being told that my mic is off. I hope you all heard that. So should I stay to this one?
Is it turned on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, use that one, please.
Use this one. Okay. Sorry. I'll be behind the podium. I hope you all got what I read and you saw that lovely highlighting, because this month, what we are focused on is it works. And what is it that works? Affirmative prayer. So I'm sure that we've all heard that phrase, ask and ye shall receive. It's not wish and ye shall receive. And it's not wait for them to read my mind and I shall receive. It's ask and ye shall receive. And so I think a lot of us have a belief that part of prayer involves asking. There's a component of asking that's included in that. And asking, though, usually means that we believe there's some sort of a need, that there's something that we're asking to receive or that we would like to have. Maybe we need help with something or we'd like something to be different. A while ago, Kathy Lady posted on her Facebook page, if you have a hard time asking for help, you have attached judgment to helping, so you can't give help without judging. Think about that. I'll repeat that. If you have a hard time asking for help, you have attached judgment to helping, so you can't give help without judging. I had to think about that. Because when we ask for help, whether it's through affirmative prayer or through however we choose to pray, is there a judgment about our need to ask for help? Has anyone here felt like they've received help from their higher power, from God, from affirmative prayer? Yeah? Some of you? Did you feel judged by asking for that? No, I don't think so. I believe that, as Ernest Holmes said in the Science of Mind text, God is a divine and impartial giver. An impartial giver. And it's God's nature to give. And I believe that as that givingness that is God, is Spirit, is the universe, is out there, it's done without judgment. So when we ask, when we hear that phrase, ask and ye shall receive, it's often followed by knock and the door shall be opened. When we knock on a door and we wait for it to be opened, or we even knock and open it ourselves, is there any judgment in that process of opening? I don't believe so. And I think that the asking process is part of that knocking and asking for it to be opened. It's a form of knocking at the door. So prayer then has some element of asking, but what distinguishes the prayer that we've been taught as we were growing up, or prayers that we might just sort of instinctually do, from what we call affirmative prayer or treatment here at the center? Well, New Thought has brought a little twist to how the asking works and what it looks like in regard to prayer. Since we believe that it is God's nature to give, and since we believe that everything we could ever want or need has already been given, think about that whole sea of potentiality that you've heard people speak about from up here that's always surrounding it. It's already been given. The asking becomes the knocking at the door within us, and we're asking ourselves, Are you ready to receive? And if you've been around New Thought for a while, you've probably heard that phrase, are you ready to receive? It's what we use to remind us of the 5 steps of affirmative prayer and the way that we teach it. The R for recognition, recognizing what God is. The bigger picture is the way I see that, what God is, the universe, spirit, light, life. The U, our U, is the unification, remembering that we are one with that. We are that which is God expressing. The next R for ready is for realization, and that's the place where we state our realization that what we are wanting has already been given. That's when we state it in the affirmative, when we state it as if it already is. That's where that idea of affirmative prayer comes from. And once we have recognized that we are ready to receive and we've opened ourselves to that, we move into thanksgiving and then release. So are you ready to receive helps us remember where we're going as we do affirmative prayer. And I believe that as we knock on the door, affirmative prayer, that the prayer itself, readying ourselves to receive, is like the key that helps us to open up that door. And again, there is no judgment as we do this process. We are assuming, again, that it is God's nature to give. It's the givingness in the universe. We already have all that we need. So that prayer, that affirmative prayer, is not changing God's mind, some picture of something out there. It's changing us, it's readying us to receive. It's opening the door, it's readying us and making us open to receive. Now, it's hard for me not to want to move out here. Has anyone ever tried to open a door into a room that is just packed full, whether they're pushing it in this way or pulling it this way? I have a great aunt who, when we went to help her get moved to assisted living, she had every room in her house from the floor to the ceiling just packed full with stuff, things, boxes. And she was still trying to get more things in her house. And you couldn't push the door open. So part of readying ourselves to receive has to do with clearing out some space where we can put some things, where we have room to put it. And I realized as I was making a New Year's decision to clear out some stuff from my house that there's a big difference between rearranging stuff and releasing and letting go of stuff. Because I was kind of like, I'd get to it and, oh, well, I might need this later. So I was making everything nice and neat, putting it into different order, putting it into different boxes, but very little of it was being released. And very little space was being made. I was just making the space look nicer. And that's when I got this aha. There's a big difference between rearranging stuff and releasing it or clearing it and letting it go. And I believe that's true on our spiritual level as well. We have all this thinking and all this stuff that's going on, and we can rearrange it and order it, but we might have that thought, well, I might need that someday. So we just sort of stick it on a shelf somewhere and make it look pretty, instead of fully letting it go. Trusting and knowing that as we go through life, everything we need is already provided. We don't have to keep it all stuffed up into a room or on the shelves. Affirmative prayer is a tool for releasing what no longer serves us. It's a tool for clearing out that space. Traditionally, affirmative prayer in the New Thought movement had to do with physical healing. And I want to note that the movie we're showing this month is called Healing. So if you're interested in that topic, hopefully you'll come to the movie. But healing was the main focus early on. Some of our early teachers, Mary Baker Eddy, Emma Curtis Hopkins, the Fillmores, and Ernest Holmes, their main focus, I would say, was on physical healing and how we work with the body to heal itself. They based that on Jesus' statement and his activity that said, all the healings that he did, you can do, and greater things than this will you be able to do also. So they took that to be, oh, we can do this too, and tapped into how it is that prayer worked in their lives to bring about healing. Again, part of that process involved clearing out space, clearing out old beliefs, old limiting beliefs. Not just rearranging stuff, but actually letting it go. Recently, I discovered that there's a magazine that's put out by Unity called the Unity Magazine. And so I decided to start getting this as well. And this month's magazine has an article called Physician, Heal Thyself. And it starts out by pointing out that any professional healer knows that no matter how clever or committed or well-trained they are, doctors, nurses, and therapists cannot impose healing from the outside in. At the best, they simply co-create the conditions within, and the only thing the healers can do is remove the impediments to this innate process. And that's true for practitioners as well. The people that serve here to help with that healing process in your life. They're not the ones doing something magical from the outside into you. They're working with you to remove any impediments to your innate ability to heal whatever it is that's showing up in your life. He concludes with, in our increasingly fast-paced and fragmented lives, it's more important than ever to create rituals that allow our souls to catch up with our bodies. Practicing conscious stillness, whether in formal meditation or in more spontaneous acts, allows our natural restorative processes to convey their many blessings. Maybe healing, health, wealth, and wellness are not achieved as much as they are allowed. And I liked that idea, that as we move into stillness and we move into practicing affirmative prayer, we're allowing the natural healing process to take place. We're not trying to push it or move it along in that way. I think affirmative prayer also helps us to focus on what it is that we want. It brings us back into alignment with what it is we want to highlight, like I was doing in the book, what we'd like to highlight in our life, what we would like to see brought forward, what we would like to remember. In doing this, we are all practitioners, and that was the other aha I had. I discovered that I'm a highlighter, just like this lovely highlighter. If I'm moving with affirmative prayer into a higher state of consciousness and I'm bringing light, I'm being a highlighter on that spiritual level. We all are, as we practice and use affirmative prayer. And sometimes we might need a little help. And there's no judgment then in terms of asking someone to assist us in that prayer work. So that's the difference then between all of us being practitioners and working with a licensed practitioner. A licensed practitioner is someone who has spent a lot of time doing their inner healing work. And like that article said, physician, heal thyself. Well, practitioners know that we are doing the healing work within ourselves. And as one with anyone who's come into our sphere and asked for help, that healing work we do on ourselves automatically moves into the realm of the other people in our lives and brings about healing. They've spent a lot of time working with affirmative prayer and seeing how it works in their lives and figuring out how they can best work with it and then help others to do the same. So they are available to assist whenever asked, whenever someone knocks on that door. So one of the things we would like to encourage you to do this month is work with a practitioner. Whether you take time to get a short treatment after the service with one of the practitioners standing around the room, or whether you call someone that's on that list for an affirmative prayer, or come into Teresa's walk-in hours or set up an appointment with me. You also have other options. You can call the World Ministry of Prayer, which is set up by the Centers for Spiritual Living. And in the Science of Mind magazine is a website as well as phone numbers, and I can give that to you after the service if you'd like. Or you can call the Unity Silent Ministry. Their silent ministry is how Unity actually got started. They've been doing prayer work for people for many, many years. And I went to their website. You type in your prayer, and you can ask for someone to get back to you in person, or you can just release it at that moment, and they'll pray over whatever it is you've given them through that email. So there's a variety of ways. You can also, as we've said, fill out the prayer requests and know that we're praying with you for the next couple of weeks, and you can keep, adding that prayer request as you see fit, as you need it. So what is it then that's happening through all these different modes of prayer? What is it they all have in common? Well, what I really came to believe is that they're shining light into those dark places, so to speak, into those places where we want to see things shifted or changed. They're helping us to remember that we are the light, that we have that light already within us, and they're helping us to bring that light forward. They're supporting us in the awareness of our wholeness and the healing that's already present and taking place within us. So with or without a practitioner, I encourage you to practice this, play with it, see how it works for you. This month's Science of Mind magazine, Jesse Jennings was asked, what proof is there that prayer even works? And what I like about his response is that he basically said it's not as important to go out there and look at what other people are doing and see how it works for them. He says, try the practice yourself and keep track of what happens. And that's one of the things that I've enjoyed doing the most since I discovered religious science, is keeping in my journal my treatments, my prayers, and then going back months later and writing in a side margin that I've left open how those prayers have been answered, how things have resolved themselves. And so, as Jesse Jennings was suggesting, and Ernest Holmes suggests it too, try it out. Practice it. See what happens. Try different ways of using affirmative prayer. And if you want some assistance in that, ask a practitioner to help you with that process. When I was a kid, the earliest memory I have of prayer working in my life was my mother called a practitioner on my behalf. I was feeling sick, and one of the things I disliked the most as a child was throwing up, so I'm sorry to even mention it. But I was feeling really bad, and so she said she would call a practitioner for me. And she got on the phone, and I could not hear what the practitioner was saying to her. But I remember watching my mother make the call, I can still see it, and watching her listen and then hang up. And literally when she hung up the phone, I felt 100% better. So as a little child, I had this sense that whatever happened worked, that prayer work had worked for me. Later, when I was in high school, I went with a church group that I was involved with to a skiing trip. And there was a bug or something that was being passed between the kids while we were on this trip. And so I felt that fear gripping me again. I didn't want to be sick. I didn't want to get this. And I decided I would try prayer. At that time, I was a part of a different system of prayer, but I went off by myself, snow all around, and again, I can still picture it. And I sat there and remembered how my mother had talked to that practitioner and how I knew that spirit could heal, that worked in people's lives. So I just asked that I be protected and that I stay healthy. And literally the sun, just rays of the sun came through the clouds and hit my chest, and I felt a warmth in the midst of all that cold snow. And in the warmth, the fear dissipated, and I felt and I knew that I was protected and that I would stay well, and I did. And so those were two incidences of my childhood that I have very clear memories of. Of course, once I found religious science and learned about affirmative prayer and how to apply it in my life, I could be here all day and into, the eons telling you story after story after story about how prayer works in my life. So what I'm going to encourage you also to do is over lunch, I know many of you have stories. Ask each other how prayer works in your life. How has affirmative prayer brought about the things that you would like to see more of in your life? Share that with each other. I'm sure there are lots of stories. As a kid, we went to Wednesday night testimonial services at the Christian Science Church where people just shared how this stuff worked. And that was something else I remember listening to and hearing. So I encourage you to share those kinds of things with each other. Again, affirmative prayer isn't about changing someone's mind out there. It's about changing ourselves and readying us to receive. When I teach affirmative prayer in classes, which again, if you want to understand this on a deeper level, I encourage you to take a class, and we talk about those 5 steps for affirmative prayer, in my mind, those are like training wheels. I don't believe there's anything magical, so to speak, about those specific 5 steps. But what Ernest Holmes found is when you prayed in a certain way, in that affirmative way, things brought about greater results than when he didn't. That was his experiment. So I again encourage you to experiment. For me, those 5 steps are the training wheels that keep me balanced, just like training wheels on a bicycle help you to balance. They keep me focused on what it is I want, and they light up my way as I'm moving forward. Originally, my prayers were about getting things, manifesting more prosperity in my life, manifesting a car, which that's a story I could share if you want to hear it someday, all kinds of things. But nowadays, the affirmative prayer in my life is more about centering into a deep knowing, a place where I move into an inner peace. And affirmative prayer for me now is about reaffirming the principles that I am choosing to live by and that I know work in my life, principles that I'm wanting to highlight and keep in the forefront of my mind, that all is in divine order, that there are no mistakes, that principle isn't based on precedence, and that any change I want to see in the world begins inside of me. Now, in the last couple of weeks, I have to say I had a day when I experienced some great discomfort because I had several people upset with me all at one time. And I felt like in that one day there were probably more people upset with me than I had upset with me in the last 5 years combined. So it wasn't a very comfortable position to be in. At the same time, in that same day, I was also in classrooms where I was hearing professors that were teaching history talk about all the horrible things that humans have perpetrated on each other. We were revisiting World War I and World War II. Some of it with very graphic detail. We were also looking at, in another class, the 2 worlds of thought that came to this country and established where we are today, and how those 2 worlds of thought are still around, and how that's what we're seeing as part of this division in our own country, that goes way, 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 way back. And so as I was having these interactions with people and as I was listening to this stuff, I started to do that downward spiral. I started to feel like, what's the point? You know, this human experience of trying to relate to people really isn't a lot of fun. I think I just want to find a cave and go crawl up in it somewhere and wait out the rest of my life. Has anybody ever felt that? Is it just me? I kept thinking, how can I make a difference? You know, we're looking at a long history here. How can I truly make a difference? I started to have that feeling again of being small and of being disconnected. And so I knew I had to get back into my center. So I started journaling in the next morning and started to process some of this, what was going on. And the phone rang. And I don't always answer the phone in the middle of my meditation time, but this was from somebody who didn't usually call. And it was another minister. And so I took the call. And 2.5 hours later, she had helped me move back into my center. She reminded me who I am, just like what the reading said at the beginning, what Ernest Holmes encourages us to do. She reminded me that I'm a light being and that I'm here doing light work. That's the terminology she used. She reminded me that it's not my job to fix everything and everyone by imposing my fixedness or my rightness from the outside in to other people's lives. She reminded me that it's not my job to force or cajole or coerce other people or even try and change the course of history. She reminded me that as a light worker, which we all are, as lights in this world, our first job is to move into affirmative prayer. Our first job is to go into that silence, to go to that still place within it and allow our consciousness to move to that higher level where we can shine light on things. And so that's when I realized again, I'm a highlighter. It clicked. And then as I'm putting this together yesterday, It was very interesting because something asked me to keep reading. I'm thinking you should be working on your talk, but I wanted to read more in this magazine. And there's an article in here, The Light Fantastic. And the article is about a man named Jacob Lieberman, who is an optometrist, an eye doctor, and a PhD. And this is what this person is saying about his research. Light is the intelligence of life. That's the conclusion that Jacob Lieberman has come to after decades of exploring light, vision, and consciousness. Light is much more than the particles and waves you've learned about in physics class. It is a purveyor of consciousness. He writes in his new book, Luminous Life, How the Science of Light Unlocks the Art of Living. Wow. I've always said, we talk about love and light, and to me, light has always been like a metaphor. But what he's saying in here is it's more than a metaphor. Everyone knows that light guides every facet of a planet's existence. Yet most of us do not realize that our lives and the lives of all living beings are reliant on, guided by, and the result of light. Light, he succinctly notes, is the invisible that makes everything visible. All our life-sustaining centers, including our nervous, endocrine, and immune systems, as well as our emotional response to life, are tied to light. And then he explains on a physical level, because that's what he's studied, what light is doing in our bodies and how it impacts our bodies. And his conclusion is that light and life are inseparable. Light guides us toward a state of oneness with everything in the universe. And then he talks about spirituality and light. And he says how physicists have talked about light as it behaves as if it's aware of everything, inseparable from everything, and everywhere at the same time. In other words, light behaves as if it is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, the very words that are used in the Bible and in Science of Mind to describe God. I was blown away, I have to say. Everything that exists is light. That's why the study of light marks the convergence of science, religion, and spirituality. And it's not quite the conclusion, but he says, when we understand that the light within us is no different than the light that guides us, we enter a state of oneness, an acceptance of life as it is. So for me, reading that yesterday was an affirmation of what I'd been thinking in terms of being a highlighter. How it is that it is important before I go into a classroom, before I come into the center, before I interact with other people, to remember who I am. For you to remember who you are. We are light. We are light beings, and we can move into that higher consciousness and bring that light into the world. We can remember that affirmative prayer is a way to exercise the highlighters that we are, that spiritual highlighting of what it is that we want to see in the world. Affirmative prayer helps us lift our consciousness to that higher level. It helps us shed light on what it is we want to see more of, the goodness that we want to remember, that we want to accent. I keep showing you we are that highlighter. It highlights the best and the good in our lives and in the lives of others. Affirmative prayer is a highlighter. You are highlighters. So I encourage you to go high and light up the world. And so it is.